Yes, that story from America was very interesting that you've alluded to. I mean, put it in layman's language, they're virtually saying, are they not, that the likelihood of us getting Virginia-class nuclear submarines is limited because America has no spare capacity to build more Virginias, which is your point that you just made, not about money, but really about skills. But they can't afford to give us Virginia-class nuclear submarines out of their existing production line because the US Navy needs them.
Yeah, now, and pick it up there. Don't forget what the AUKUS plan is, that in the early 2030s we'd have 3 to 5 Virginia-class submarines purchased from America, 50 billion or so, to get those 3 to 5 operating in Australian waters. Now, if America says, if the US Congress is oppressed with the feeling that to do that would take America behind in this race with the Chinese for more nuclear subs to get the dominance with China over China on nuclear sub numbers, then you can see a president, probably a Democrat other than Biden. It might be the son of Trump, a Republican other than Trump, who's getting advice from Secretary of Defence that says, look, these Aussies are good allies, Mr. President, but if we peel off from our production line 3 to 5 Virginia class, we're going to be fatally behind in the arms race with China. Now, that would leave us, because of the decision that we've walked into, all gung-ho for AUKUS, the great god AUKUS, that would leave us without submarine protection as the Collins class are retired in the 2030s, waiting on a tardy British shipyard that's quite notorious for cost overruns and delays to run off the new, as yet entirely undesigned submarine, the Special AUKUS class, 2050s.
Yeah, well, it'd take 10 years to design it and then 10 years to build it. That's the AUKUS submarine. Let me just go back to the Congress. I mean, there they are. Let's take the here and now. And how valid is this? All this hoopla about AUKUS is done, and they're all congratulating one another and taking pictures and so on. But there is a very strong argument from US legislators that selling Australia 3 Virginia-class submarines would worsen, that's what's being said now, the US Navy's shortfall of nuclear-powered submarines. So, Bob Carr, supply Australia with submarines, and the US falls short. So where are we? It does seem as though this AUKUS deal is invalid almost before it's begun.
Well, I had my article in the Sydney Morning Herald appear on Monday, tentatively raising a question mark over the American readiness to supply us and raising the question of where we're going to be if they opt not to. And you wouldn't believe it, before my article's off the Herald website, there's an article on the Financial Review website that says a discussion paper prepared for Republican congressmen in Washington says we simply shouldn't be giving subs to the Australians because it would leave the US order of battle disadvantaged in the race with the Chinese.
Yes.
Now, the Republican leadership, Senator Wicker and Senator Collins, with the support, I think of about 30 of their Republican colleagues, shot that letter through to the letter went off to the president, dated July 27. This is happening fast, saying we cannot proceed with the AUKUS deal.
That's the point. It is happening quickly. And that document you refer to is the US Congressional Research Service, and it's arguing, and this is just this week, that AUKUS could fail to live up to its deterrence objectives with nuclear-powered submarines in Australian hands. Now, they say, the report says, and I quote, "Skeptics of transferring Virginia-class submarines from the United States to Australia might argue that it could weaken deterrence of potential Chinese aggression if China were to find reason to believe, correctly or not, that Australia might use the transferred Virginia-class boats less effectively than the US Navy would use them if the boats were retained in US Navy service, or that Australia might not involve its military, including its Virginia-class boats, in a US-China crisis that Australia viewed as not engagingly important." Now, all of this is my point about debate, the reason I'm speaking to you, Bob Carr, former Foreign Minister. I mean, shouldn't this stuff be discussed instead of just hands up, congratulate ourselves, it's all happening? It isn't happening at all, is it?
It's not happening. It's not happening. Tony Abbott is entitled to make the point that if he'd been able to grab off the shelf the Japanese subs they would be in the waters to our north now. And they're pretty effective, and the latest version of those Saruo class are very effective, I'm told. But then Malcolm Turnbull, to give him credit, in that very formidable, well-argued bid for the French subs that are very lethal. The French wouldn't settle for anything less.
And 55 billion.
And 55 billion, which everyone thought at the time, Alan, was a huge price. But 55 billion, press the fast play button, and we're looking at 400 billion. 400 billion. Malcolm Turnbull would say, if you pressed him, well, look, if that had gone ahead, the first would be arriving in the 2030s. Given what's happening in the US Congress, there's a serious possibility that they won't be handing over their subs to Australia because, Alan, we're too compliant an ally. The discussion in the Oval Office would go something like this. The Secretary of Defence talking to the President, whoever it is at the time, saying, look, we did enter this agreement with the Australians. We call it AUKUS. You might have heard of it, Mr. President. Well, the President in 3 years' time might not have heard of it. He or she might not have a stake in this at all. The Secretary of Defence would say, well, I think we're going to have to tell the Australians the pressing urgency of our competition with China means that we're going to require every last nuclear sub because we can't squeeze more than 1.2 new Virginia class out of our dockyards. It's impossible. We haven't got the workforce.
No, that's it. And at the same time, as I speak to the former Foreign Minister here, Bob Carr, those Republicans and the Democrats are demanding more funding from the White House to boost American production of submarines before they'll agree to any transfer of Virginia-class boats to America. They're virtually saying, Mr. President, listen, unless you provide more money, this deal can't go ahead.